as teachers, we have a tendency to blame ourselves when we fall short. I think that we kind of are down on ourselves when we feel like we can't rise to the occasion. But I think in this case that it's so much bigger than just us. Like, it's systemic. It's something that's happening on a much grander scale. So that's something I want you to kind of keep in mind as we talk about burnout and as we kind of discuss it, that it's not just all on you, right? So what is burnout? Okay, so this is actually a definition from a book called Burnout, the High Cost of Achievement, and it defines burnout as the extinction of motivation or incentive, especially where one's devotion to a cause or relationship fails to produce the desired results. I really like this definition because I like the word extinction. Because when you're burnt out and you lose your motivation or incentive, it feels like you're never going to get it back. It feels like it has gone extinct. It is with the dinosaurs. We're never going to feel that way again. When that cause or devotion fails to produce the desired results. And that could be student engagement. It could be, you're not getting the same good feelings that you used to get from teaching. It's not giving you that endorphin high anymore. Like, you're not getting the satisfaction that you used to out of face-to-face teaching now that we've gone fully online. So I feel like this definition really kind of, it tackles all those parts of burnout that I have felt before. Oh, and please remember to mute your microphone. I think we have some background noise and we don't want to have any echo. So please make sure you're muted or double check. All right, so I want to look at I want to skip this slide. And I want to go into, what does burnout feel to you? So take some time in the chat, and I really want to know, what does burnout feel like to you? Like, how do you feel it? How do you experience burnout? Because I know that we've all kind of struggled with this. So take some time in the chat. I'll put on some tunes while you are doing so, and then we'll come back when we have enough responses. All right, so we got a lot of really good responses in the chat. I'm going to kind of go through these and kind of work through them. So Michelle says loss of energy. Terry says, so Michelle Scoville says loss of energy. Michelle Lee says lethargic. So that's kind of related. Terry says procrastination. Terry, I get it. So procrastination that's a whole other talk to have, but procrastination is really interesting because as a kind of coping mechanism, it keeps you from something that you're afraid of. Like, it thinks it's protecting you because it's like, oh, we don't want to be in this scary situation, so we're gonna like put it until the last minute. But that's a whole other talk. But yeah, I really think burnout can cause you to procrastinate because you just don't have enough energy. You don't have enough energy to even put the work into the thing that you know that you need to do. And if you don't do, it's going to be, an even bigger issue. So we've got low motivation. Sarah says loss of compassion. So this is a big one. I really felt this whenever I was in grad school. So at the time I was, a teaching fellow, I was in grad school. I had anxiety and I had depression. I was unmedicated. I also had sleep apnea. And what that means, for those of you who maybe have it, it's when you stop breathing in your sleep and you don't really sleep, and it's pretty miserable. And I was waking up every 2 minutes, kind of gasping for breath. It was really horrible. So I was exhausted all the time and I became very burnt out. And in response to that, I was really terrible about my students. I remember I went to a movie with a friend and we were in the elevator and I was just complaining about my students, like how, whiny they were and they needed this, and that, and why couldn't they just leave me alone? And I remember my friend was absolutely horrified because, there were other people in the elevator, and she's like, I don't want them to get the idea that this is all teachers do, that all we do is complain about our students. And I talked to her some years later, and I kind of explained where I was coming from at that time. And she was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, there is this kind of loss of compassion that comes with burnout. We have a loss of compassion for our students, and we have a loss of compassion for ourselves. And it's only when we start to extend that compassion to ourselves that we can start doing that for our students as well. So that really resonated with me, Sarah. Thank you so much. So Angie is saying struggling to stay caught up. This is a recurring thing with burnout. It's the feeling that even if you did get caught up, there's no way that you can stay caught up, right? So it's just like the list keeps getting longer and longer and longer, and there's a sense of defeatism because it doesn't really matter if you get stuff done because there's always going to be something on the list to get done. So we have Nancy says boredom. That's a really big thing. Laura says, can't even start, procrastination. Christy has a good one, says, it makes me shut down and not want to be productive. I know with me, with my anxiety and how it manifests, when I feel like I'm not working at the level or the standard that I set for myself, I get very discouraged and I shut down emotionally. And I don't want to do anything. I don't want to get better. I don't want to do better. And then what actually happens is I don't do the work, or I do the work very poorly, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So yeah, that whole part of feeling shut down and not wanting to be productive. We've got a lot of people saying overwhelmed. April says low motivation and lack of zeal. Michelle says depressed because the magic of teaching is gone. Oh, that really hit me right here, because teaching can be so incredibly magical when you get with a student and you help them have their light bulb moment. And that's really hard to do with online teaching. It's really hard. It's harder to see with online teaching because you're kind of more disconnected from the student. You're not sitting there with them face to face, kind of helping them through and helping them work through a problem. There are ways to find the magic again, but that'll be a whole other talk, Michelle, but I understand that. Crystal, I'm easily annoyed by students for not reading directions, following instructions, reading announcements, all of that. Yeah, because it seems like we put so much work into these things, and it's like, why aren't you reading them? Like, why do I have, you often feel like a broken record, like you're having to repeat over and over and over again the thing that you wrote, that you thought you wrote clearly. So that can be quite frustrating, and it can cause you to kind of lash out at your students. Yeah. Jolyn says not even wanting to begin something you used to enjoy. And that's really heartbreaking because I've loved teaching ever since I started. But, during that time in grad school where I was super burnt out, it's just I didn't care. I didn't care anymore, and I did not enjoy it. And I think that was the saddest part. In case you were wondering, Cindy Stormer's doing great. I love Cindy. Cindy, you are an absolute trooper. We all need a Cindy in our lives. Hoyt says, Hoyt Teller says, lonely, anxious, and unmotivated. I really want to touch on that, like the loneliness of it. I think what happens when we're burnt out is we're so hard on ourselves and we think that nobody else is experiencing what we're experiencing. And there's this weird kind of shame that comes with burnout. It's the shame that, why couldn't I get it together? Why couldn't I do better? Why have I allowed myself to become like this? And, the opposite of shame is connection, right? And if we're able to connect with others, if we're able to be vulnerable about how it is that we feel and what we're experiencing, we're going to find out really quickly that we're not alone and that we're not the only ones feeling like this. As you can see, Hoyt, like a lot of us are feeling the same way. So a lot of you guys are displaying the classic symptoms of burnout. Okay, but you knew that, right? So reduced performance and productivity, anxiety, detachment, feeling listless, difficulty concentrating. There's also physical symptoms of burnout that we might not have touched on, but things like exhaustion, generalized aches and pains, headaches. I know for me, gastrointestinal things, that's my big thing. I have this thing where whenever I feel nervous or anxious, I get a tightening of my throat and I have to have this weird cough every time. So burnout can definitely contribute to that. Hypertension, difficulty sleeping, increased susceptibility to cold and flu. Burnout can actually diminish your ability to fight off certain diseases because your immune system is so low. So let's talk a little bit about the risk factors for burnout. So I think a lot of you guys this will probably resonate with you. So one is if you identify so strongly with work that you lack balance between your work life and your personal life. I know that this was really true for me, and it has been really difficult because I think growing up, my sense of self-worth was connected to my work, and that was my identity. And especially as a teacher in grad school, that's all I really did. It's who I was. And so there was this like lack of balance between my work life and a personal life because I didn't really have a personal life. And so I think when you're so heavily invested in one thing as your identity, and that's the only thing that you do, that puts you at a high risk for burnout. You have a high workload, including overtime work. Hello, adjuncts. We definitely do have that. I still adjunct for Connect, and because I never want to forget what it's like for you guys to teach. But there's a lot of things to do. We do a lot more than just those semester hours, right? That we get paid for. Another thing is you try to be everything to everyone. This is something that I personally struggled with, especially working with faculty. Like I want to be there for faculty all the time. I feel like you deserve to have somebody there for you who's going to help you, who's going to guide you through things. But sometimes I just have to be like, okay, here's my YouTube channel because I just can't be there all the time, and I can't be that for everyone. And so that puts you at a higher risk for burnout, and I really understand that. If you work in a helping profession, here they give the example of healthcare, but I think teaching is also a helping profession. If you feel like you have little or no control over your work, which that can really apply, especially when we started teaching at the beginning, we just felt like we had no control over what was happening and where classes were going and all of that. Also, if your job is monotonous, that you are at high risk for burnout. And, teaching is really rewarding, but there are really monotonous parts to it. So what are the consequences if we decide to do nothing, if we decide to stay burnt out and we can't get out of it? There's issues with chronic stress, fatigue, insomnia. You can even, fall into alcohol or substance abuse because you're trying to figure out a way to cope with the symptoms of burnout or trying to escape. It also lead to things like heart disease or type 2 diabetes or lowered immunity. So the cost is really high if we don't do anything about it. So I'm going to continue to talk about ways that we can kind of combat it and be able to recognize when we're becoming burnt out before we've kind of been snuffed out completely. All right, so quick question for the chat. Which two positions have higher burnout rates? Go ahead and put your answer in the chat and I'll play some tunes while you're answering. Okay, so we've got a lot of good answers. So let's kind of look at these. So our options were firefighters and mechanics. We had librarians and journalists, or teachers and physicians. And it looks like, with the exception of a couple of you guys who might think that librarians have it really hard. I mean, I'm not going to say anything to that because we might have some librarians in here, and librarians are my absolute favorite people. I find that I'm a Ravenclaw in the Harry Potter houses, and a lot of my really close friends are librarians because I like to be friends with people who know things. So, but a lot of you guys are picking C, and you would be correct. So teachers and physicians, it's those helping jobs that we talked about, those helping professions that have a much higher risk of burnout. So teachers especially experience a high level of burnout because teaching is a job where you wear multiple hats, right? And they all have these different hats that you wear present their own emotional and intellectual challenges. Not only that, a teacher's professional success depends on their own performance, and on the academic performance of your students. So if you're not getting positive teaching evaluations, and I know a lot of us probably didn't get positive teaching evaluations because of the pandemic, that can be an additional stressor. We also have the issue of the need to provide support for students from a wide variety of backgrounds. They have different emotional and educational needs, and they often lack a support system. And so I feel like a lot of times teachers are trying to be everything to their students. You know, we're trying to be an entertainer, we're trying to be an educator, we're trying to be almost a therapist sometimes, which don't do that. We have people who can do that for you in student development services. And if you are trying to do that, contact me and I will connect you with somebody. But some signs of burnout, like we talked about, emotional exhaustion is a big piece of that for teachers. Where you have less patience with your students and you feel overwhelmed by your, students' educational or emotional needs. Physical exhaustion, we talked a lot about this, right? Like feeling tired during or throughout the day. And also mental exhaustion, feeling like you can't, your brain just isn't, it's not working and you can't really accomplish the things that you need to accomplish in order for you to be a successful teacher and for your students to learn successfully. So the reason for that is pretty simple, and it's that online courses require more prep time. They require more work. So versus face-to-face classes. So to plan a 1-hour lecture, it takes 10 hours for an online lecture versus a face-to-face, which is 8 hours. An online tutorial takes 6 hours for online or 5 hours face-to-face. And the hours needed to plan a new course unit for an online class, it's 100 hours versus 96 for a face-to-face class. So that's a huge part of it. And I think that there is a lot of invisible labor that goes into preparing for online classes that we don't necessarily think about. I think as a teacher, I'm really good at being extemporaneous and like figuring out what to do on the fly, and I can kind of do it and improv it in the classroom, but that is not really something you can do with online teaching. There's so much prep involved. The other reason is that we spend a lot more time teaching online based on our skill level. So a novice person, of course, is going to spend more hours working on a class versus an intermediate person or an advanced person. So it is based on your skill level. If you're coming to online teaching for the first time, that can be a real handicap when it comes to the amount of hours you're going to be spending. This is where our time goes when we're teaching online. So most of the time we're doing grading and feedback, which is interesting because I think it's kind of flipped whenever we're doing face-to-face, or at least I feel like this part is longer. So synchronous communication constitutes that's the smallest thing you're doing. And I think a lot of us, whenever we moved to online, we wanted to hold on to synchronous communication and kind of like having live lectures and stuff like that because it felt most familiar to us as teachers. But that's not something you can really do online. Synchronous is okay sometimes, but it has to be optional and it has to be recorded for students to watch later. And students who learn online do better with asynchronous courses. So I want to talk a little bit about the combustion triangle. You guys probably saw this in science class. But in order to create fire, you need three things, right? You need oxygen, you need heat, and you need fuel. So I kind of adapted this for my own purposes. And this is kind of, the self-care maybe triangle, or like protecting your fire triangle. So instead of oxygen, I have boundaries, which I kind of call your room to breathe. And instead of heat, I have your passion or your spark. And then your fuel is really your self-care. So we're going to go through each one of these. So setting boundaries. So I absolutely hate this quote. It says, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. It's complete BS. I think that the problem I have with this quote is that it tells you that if you enjoy what you're doing, it's not work. And that's completely not true. You can love what you're doing. I love teaching. It's so enjoyable. It's so wonderful. I'm very fulfilled by it, but it is still work. I still have to put work in. I still have to put hours in. It's still something that's taking out. So I have to set boundaries with it, because if I don't, it's going to take over completely, right? If I let it. So I had a problem with boundaries for a long time because I felt like having boundaries was bad, because it feels so good to give. And you probably feel this as well. Like when you give somebody a present for Christmas, it feels good because it kind of validates our own self-worth. But setting boundaries is actually really important because it allows you to kind of preserve your energy and protect your fire. right? We want to protect that flame. We don't want it to go out. And so the more energy you have, the more you can give to the people in your life who matter, like your family and your friends, stuff like that. We need to think about work in terms of input and output, right? What are we putting in and how is that fueling what we're putting out? Because if we're not putting enough in, we can just output, and then all of a sudden we're exhausted and we don't know why. So kind of keeping track of what is being replenished and what is being used. And like I said, teaching can be very satisfying, but it is still an out. It is not an in. So go ahead and take to the chat. I want to know, what are some ways that you set boundaries while working from home? I want to see how you've done that. You guys should be pros at it by now. We've been doing it since March. So go ahead and put that in the chat and I'll play some tunes while you're doing that. All right, we have a lot of good responses and I'll kind of like keep them rolling in, but these are really good. So Jolyn Tucker says, I stopped answering emails at all hours of the night. And yeah, that can be a huge problem because I think part of feeling burnout is feeling inadequate, right? And so we feel like we're not up to snuff, that we're not doing enough. And so we can overcompensate by making ourselves available all the time. And that's not necessarily healthy. It's actually not great because you're never stepping away from work. I know for myself, I don't have my phone here right now. Maybe that's a really good example of me having boundaries. But I used to have my email on my phone and I had to delete it because there's a part of us in our brain, if somebody here is an expert in like neurochemistry and social media, but there's something called, I forget what it's called. I don't know the term. A ludic loop. So what happens is, this is how Facebook works, right? Like we post something and then we get a like and then we get another like and then we get addicted to that little hit of dopamine every time we check. And that works with email too. So I was constantly checking my email and so I would get the little hit of dopamine, but then I just have an existential crisis because I had so many emails coming in that I couldn't respond to. So the line between me and the work really blurred, especially at the beginning when we started in March, because it was just real fast and furious and hectic. I think I worked at a kitchen table for the first 3 months of quarantine. But yeah, so that's a really, really good point that you have there. And to stop answering emails at all times of the night and let your students know that maybe you're only going to answer emails from a certain time or in a certain time frame. I love Thomas's idea of only answering emails from 9 to 10, because that kind of goes with Nancy, where Nancy says she has office hours where she can receive phone calls and return emails. And I think that there is this thing, once again, where we're in our emails and we're kind of checking messages constantly, ding, 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 and it doesn't really allow us to have concentrated time to work. And it really it only becomes a kind of thing that rips our focus away. Stephanie says separating workspace from living space. So this was a huge problem for me when we started, because like I said, I was working at the kitchen table on a Surface, I think, for the first 3 months of lockdown. And now I transformed one of my bedrooms in my apartment. It has a sign on the door that says workroom, and it also has a little sign where you can actually shift what it says, so that way my partner can know I'm in a meeting or do not disturb. So that has really been helpful. Giving yourself a stop time, having time for students to contact you. A lot of this is setting time limits. And that's really important. I think if you can have something like a timer on your phone, or if you can set a timer on a computer for it to go off at a certain time, and no matter what you're doing, you have to walk away. Right? You have to go take a walk around the block or something. That can be really helpful. Or having somebody hold you accountable. Like my partner, I used to eat at my desk all the time and I just be consumed with something. And so now the rule is I can't eat in here anymore. I have to go eat out there. So he'll come and say, hey, dinner's ready, it's tacos or whatever. And he's like, do you want to hear? And I'm like, no, I have to go over there. So that is the rule. And it helps me kind of disconnect and get away from the workspace. turning off things like media, sticking to your schedule. Hoyt says actively walking more. This is a huge thing for me. I sit at this desk all day and my hips hurt as a result. And so I often forget to go walking. And really just having that change of perspective is really positive. Like getting away and getting some space, right? We need to create that room to breathe for ourselves so we can protect our fire. Setting schedules are good. Stepping away from your phone is good. Timelines. I love Carla's thing about me time. And I love what she says, only on the days I work for TCC. I know a lot of us are doing a lot, especially when you're an adjunct, you kind of have to juggle a lot of stuff. So it's like not even just TCC that you're working with, you're probably working 2 or 3 gigs, right, to make ends meet. So it can be difficult to find time in between there to kind of replenish. But me time is really, really awesome. What else do we have? Robin says, me time is a real thing. I have anime time with my son. Oh, that sounds so sweet. That sounds replenishing. I really, really like that. And Dory sounds like she has heaven. She has her own quiet area or no one is allowed to bother me for a few hours. I don't answer phone or email. This is really awesome. Cool. Yeah. An Apple Watch that makes you stand up and breathe. Yeah, I have a Fitbit. I need to start wearing it because it does have little buzzy things that go ahead and allow you to every hour, like you're supposed to get up and move. So yeah, anyway, yeah, these are all really, really good. So I think you guys have really hit on all of the things, right? The only thing I would say is the get dressed. I struggle with that because I'll work all day in my pajamas and it doesn't feel great. So I probably need to work on that. And also clocking out at the end of the day is really important. Okay, so boundaries. I want to talk about those a little bit. So the thing with boundaries, like we talked about, is I think that we can think of them as something really negative, but I think they are essential to protecting ourselves. This is a book that you probably all recognize, which is The Giving Tree, right? And you remember The Giving Tree? This kid comes over and he's like, hey, I want an apple. And then he's like, hey, I need some branches. Hey, can I use your wood to make a house? And eventually the tree is just, it's the giving tree. That's its job, right? It's going to continue to give. And it gives until really that there's nothing left, right? So I really like this take on the giving tree. It's by Topher Payne, and I'll go ahead and let me copy paste and put the link into the chat. It's very sweet, and it's a kind of rewrite of the giving tree, and he says that he fixed it. And so what he does is, it's not the giving tree anymore. It's the tree that set healthy boundaries. So, the adult man comes to the tree and asks it, I have a wife, I have children, I need wood for a house. And then the tree, instead of saying, yes, you can take my wood, it's like, hold on a minute. This is getting out of hand. And so what happens is it says, it was all well and good when I was helping you by giving you apples, but, it's gotten too far out of hand. You're taking too much, right? This is what the tree says to the man. And and he kind of gives him what for, right? And lets him know, like, hey, you are violating my boundaries. You are taking advantage of my good nature. And eventually the man kind of realizes that's what he's doing. And instead of kind of consuming the tree and burning the tree up, the tree is able to have these healthy boundaries with the man, and it's able to survive and be there for the man's children and his grandchildren. So I really love this. I love this rewrite of the giving tree. There's a quote that I like, and it says, don't set yourself on fire to keep somebody else warm, right? And I feel like this really relates to the giving tree. Don't go ahead and do that to yourself just for the sake of another person, because there's only one you. And of course, I clicked out of my presentation, so I'm going to have to go back. Thank you guys for your patience. Hopefully you're not feeling too burnt out. Okay. By this presentation. All right. Okay. So we talked about how to set boundaries by working at home. And we talked a little bit about setting boundaries with teaching. I'll talk a little bit about these more, but we talked about setting up times to work and sticking to it. You know, I like when I'm teaching, not commenting on every student's comment. That can become intense really quickly, and it can take up too much time. What I like to do instead is I'll send an email kind of responding to the themes that I see present in the discussion. So I'll be like, hey, I graded this, or I graded this assignment, or I graded this discussion. I'm noticing a lot of you guys are struggling with the idea of a thesis statement. Like, here is some feedback, right? So that's one way that you can prevent yourself from trying to answer every single question. You can use template replies to answer emails. You can set these up in Outlook. You can have a template, and then whenever you get such an email from a student, you could just hit template and say reply, right? And I think a lot of times with emails, I would really struggle with that because I felt like, oh, I don't have an answer to give this student, and I would feel really bad about it, and then I would avoid the email, and then it would become an even bigger problem, right? I think most students just want to feel like they've been heard. So even if you don't have an answer right away, you could just tell them like, hey, I want to let you know, or you can have an automatic reply that says, you know, thank you for your email. It has been received, and I'll get back to you within a certain amount of time. Or even if you're unsure of something, if they ask a question, it's like, thank you so much. I will go ahead and look into that for you, and I'll get back to you at a later time. So these are some ways you can kind of use those boundaries and set those boundaries with your teaching. So I want to talk a little bit, I'll end with a discussion of self-care. This is what we, oh, and I want to look in the comments really quick. So yeah, Rashmi Sharma says, yes, at one point I did that, I used a template. So yeah, anything that you can use to really protect your time is vital. Also, wait, let me go back to that previous slide. I create a spreadsheet of my frequently used comments on papers that I grade, because you know everybody's going to have problems with thesis statements, or everybody's going to have problems with the body paragraph. So instead of typing it over and over and over again, just have it somewhere where you can cut and you can paste, and then that just kind of preserves your time and gives it back to you. Okay, so self-care. What is self-care? When we think about self-care, we often think about this, right? We think about jade rollers. We think about Gwyneth Paltrow. We think about Goop, right? We think about all of that stuff that, you know, the beauty self-care kind of community wants to sell us, right? We want to be sold jade rollers and oils and face masks, right? But that's not what really self-care is. Self-care is much more basic. Self-care is sleep. Self-care is eating, and self-care is drinking water, right? And I look to Maslow's pyramid of needs, and I think that this is something that we can look at in regards to our own sense of burnout, our own needs. We need those physiological needs met before we can do higher function things. So a lot of our students are struggling with things like shelter. They're struggling with things like food security, and they're struggling financially because of this pandemic. And so if they're struggling with that, it is much harder for them to learn, right? And we do have resources available to those students, and you can contact Student Development Services about that. But this is something that you need to look at for yourself, right? Like whenever I get upset and cranky, and I'm cranky and I'm in a mood and I'm really mad, or I'm really upset, or I'm really anxious, I just think like, okay, what is going on with me? Like, oh, you haven't drunk any water. Like, did you drink water? Did you, have you eaten? Have you had a snack? Have you showered? Right? So these are things to think about, like when we're feeling burnout, when we're feeling kind of used up, like what is it that's missing, right? How can I replenish? Oh, Carla also says students with medical needs. You need to take that into account. Oh, Thomas says, I set my work area facing a window. When 2 bird feeders just outside the window, it made a huge difference in my COVID mental health. Oh my God, that is so lovely, Thomas. That feels like a dream. Yeah, you literally changed your perspective, right? So you gave yourself that room to breathe, really. And I think that's really, really beautiful. That was a really beautiful way to take care of yourself. And I want to do more things like that. So I'll say this, you can't pour from an empty cup, guys. So if you keep pouring and pouring and pouring into someone or something, eventually that cup's going to run dry, right? and we want our cup to runneth over. We want to fill that cup, and we want to have enough energy for our friends, for our family, and for the things that we enjoy doing in life, because that fuels us, that kind of protects our fire, like we've been talking about this whole time. And I also like this image right here, the oxygen mask principle. You guys have probably heard about this if you've ever been on a plane. It's taking care of yourself first before we can help others. I think there is this impulse that we have to put others ahead of us, especially if you're an educator, especially if you're a woman. I think we try to prioritize other people. And it's easier. It's easier to prioritize other people and take care of their needs, because then we don't have to be vulnerable, right? So with this, it's about taking care of your needs, because you're the only person who can take care of yourself, right? You're the only person who knows what you need and who knows what you require to flourish and to feel better, right? And if you don't prioritize yourself, nobody else will, right? And so you'll keep giving and giving and giving, and you will be burnout and you will be resentful, and it's not a good thing, right? So please, please, please take care of yourself so you can take care of others. There are people who need you in their lives. Like if you're a caregiver or a sibling or, you know, a child of an older parent, you need to take care of yourself in order to care for them. And the principle is the same with our students. Like we need to take care of ourselves so we can serve them as well. All right. Now I want you to take to the chat. I know we've had a couple of them, but please share the self-care activities that fill your cup. So go ahead and do that in the chat. So hopefully we can get some ideas of how to fill our cups as we continue. All right, we got some really great responses that I want to talk about. And if you're hearing that like click, click, click noise, it's my hamster. He comes out occasionally to drink water, and he's decided right now he needs to get a drink of water. All right, so yeah. Oh man, we got some good ones. So like Christy says that she watches smut TV, Real Housewives. I love that. I've recently gotten hooked on 90 Day Fiance the other way, and I am horrified. I'm fully horrified. I watch that with my partner, and it's just like, oh my God, these people, like I thought we were bad, but there's something about seeing a relationship, you know, you don't want it to disintegrate, but seeing it disintegrate on screen, it's just like you think about all the ways they could have communicated with each other and have been honest, and it's just it's a good watch. Yeah. We've got people saying Beverly Hills. I'm not sure what RHOSLC is, Crystal. You might have to spell that out for me. But Carla also said change hats. So I think this is really important. Whenever you are feeling like you're at the end of your rope or you're kind of burnout, change your hat, change your perspective, right? Kind of downshift into self-care mode, right? I think changing hats is really good if you have like some creative hobbies that replenish you. So you're like, okay, I'm no longer a teacher right now. I am a seamstress or I am a painter, right? I think a lot of times we can think like, oh, no, that's silly stuff. That's not stuff that I need to be, I can't do that stuff. I have a deadline. I have things to do. But those things are really valuable because they replenish, right? And they allow you to have that energy to do the thing that has a deadline. So in prioritizing that, you're actually giving yourself more energy to get the things that have deadlines done, right? Let's see. Sarah says she tries to find one thing to laugh about every day. A lot of you guys have put online shopping, and I think at least one of you said that's not a good thing. I know, especially with the pandemic, the amount of online shopping that I do has just skyrocketed, because there's something about being able to buy something online and have it appear, on your doorstep. It's just like a present every time. So maybe watch that online shopping, have a budget, like that's essential. But still, like online shopping, if it does something for you, you get that little hit of dopamine. But like I said, watch it. Make sure it doesn't get out of control. Carrie says, nap, pedicures, and spending time with my husband and my dog. I got 3 of them. Oh my God. I know exactly how that feels. And then Thomas says, the window I work facing also faces the yard where my 4 dogs play. He's a hiker and he loves the outdoors, so it keeps her sane. Vitamin D is a nice bonus as well. Yeah, sunlight. I think, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, I was like, I locked myself down. I was like, I am not leaving this apartment. I just didn't want to go anywhere. And I forgot that I could go outside, right? So getting outside, getting that fresh air, it's about taking a different perspective. It's about getting your head straight, clearing your thoughts of something that's bothering you or all the work that you have to do. We've got nail spa, pedicures, playing with puppies. Reading is really good. I've rediscovered reading lately. I just finished Dune by Frank Herbert. It's really good. So reading is great because it exercises your imagination, right? It's different from watching TV. TV kind of like it plucks you out of the stream, but when you go back in again, you're kind of in the same place. It doesn't really, it has the potential to replenish you, but I think like reading is a little bit better in that regard because you're actively using your imagination and you feel like you've gone somewhere physically. Let's see what else. April, you are a champion. April walks about 2.5 miles every day. Wow, you are #goals. That's wonderful. Yeah, naps are great. Disco naps, just get a little nap in. I love that, absolutely. Yeah, so I love Michelle Scoville. Haha, it's like a present. One thing I have been doing, I guess you can call it online shopping, but I've played the game. You probably heard about it. It's called Hunt a Killer, and it's a mystery game. And I got the Blair Witch series, and so I get 1 box every month, and then basically you have an objective that you have to figure out for that box. I sat down when I got my first box with my partner and we played for 3 hours, and then we didn't finish it until the next day, and I got 2 more hours of play out of it. So that was really incredible. So we've been playing more games like that. I really like there's a game called Hive, and it's like chess, but instead of chess, it's bugs. And you have hexagonal tiles, and the bugs move in different ways. And the object of the game is to surround your opponent's queen. So for me, when I play chess, I always feel bad because I'm not good at it. But with this game, I really love it because there is no board and it's constantly changing. And so it's a lot freeing in that regard. So we're doing that. I'm also playing a card game called Fox in the Forest. So for me, it's really been playing games with my partner in order to spend time with him. So a lot of you guys are talking about the new Dune movie. Yes, Thomas, I'm waiting for Timothée Chalamet as Muad'Dib, so I cannot wait for that. So yeah. Oh, Thomas is also reading Jane Goodall's autobiography. Yeah, waiting for that new Dune movie. So yeah, just, write a list if you want to of the things that fill your cup. Because they can change, some things that you really enjoyed, could kind of lose that luster and you might have to do something else. But feel free to kind of experiment with that and find something that works for you, and just know that caring for yourself, it is incredibly difficult, but it is incredibly rewarding, right? And you're going to reap those rewards in the work that you do and the care and attention that you're going to be able to lavish on your family and the hard work you're going to be able to give your students. So maintain that triangle, guys, right? We want to have those boundaries. You want to keep up the passion and the spark, and you want that self-care so you can continue to fuel that fire. So that's it for me, you guys. So congratulations, you have finished adjunct orientation. I want to thank you so much for spending the time with me. I know you guys are really busy, and especially the week before we start, there's a lot of work to do. So if you could, I've dropped a link into the chat for you to evaluate this session. There's also a section in that evaluation that asks about different topics you would like to be covered. I'm working on my calendar for professional development sessions and webinars, so you can let me know what you want to see. If it's more stuff like this about burnout, do you want more stuff about like teaching through anxiety or imposter syndrome? Stuff like that. I think we can all get it. And yeah, so I'm just really thankful to be here for you guys. I love teaching and I love teaching teachers. So I'm definitely here for you. If you need it, just please reach out in Teams or via email. And yeah, I guess I will see you later. I'm going to play some music while everybody goes out. But thank you so much for joining me tonight. And I look forward to connecting with you as you move forward in teaching.